want to talk to you today about the importance of doing what you're told. There's a story in the Bible of a couple of people that didn't exactly do what they were told. And I want to tell you about them today. We're going to start in Exodus 24 and verse 1. And I'm going to tell you about Nadab and Abihu. Now, you may have heard of them before, but we don't talk about this a whole lot. And I was just reading this morning. I'm like, yeah, I think we should talk about this. This is God talking to Moses in verse 1. And he says to Moses, God says to Moses, come up to the Lord, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and you shall worship at a distance. Moses alone was to come up before them. Now, who are Nadab and Abihu? Nadab and Abihu were the two firstborn sons of Aaron. And Aaron, of course, became the high priest of Israel back when Moses, it was Moses and Aaron, and because Aaron was Moses's brother, and therefore Nadab and Abihu were Moses's nephews. So Moses goes before God over the course of the next few verses, and God gives him instructions, and Moses goes and he instructs the people. And all is well and good. Now remember, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, they're all called, but only Moses goes before God. But what happens in verse 9? In verse 9, Moses went up with Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and they saw, what did they see? They saw the God of Israel. Can you imagine? This is Old Testament. This is before Jesus. People are not having visions and dreams and such. They're just barely out of Egypt. And they saw the God of Israel. This is what they saw. Under his feet, there appeared to be a pavement of sapphire, as clear as the sky itself. Imagine the bluest sky, and it's clear, and God is standing on something that looks like that, because sapphire is blue. Yet, even though they saw God, God did not stretch out his hand against the nobles of the sons of Israel, and they beheld God, and they ate, and they drank. Imagine, just think about this. Even today, you are just a person. Yeah, you're the nephew of the leader of the country, okay? But still, you're just a common person. And you go up and you see God. I mean, that would be amazing. Because remember, later on, or maybe it was before this, Moses wanted to see God, and God put him in the cleft of a rock and showed him his glory after he walked past. You can't see God and live. So, let's go over to Exodus 28. Continue the story in Exodus 28, starting in verse 1. Exodus 28:1. Don't you know I turned the page too far. Then bring near to yourself Aaron your brother and his sons, which would be Nadab and Abihu, from among the sons of Israel to minister as priest to me. Aaron the father, Nadab and Abihu, Eleazar and Ithamar, Aaron's sons. So Aaron had 4 sons. And you shall make holy garments for Aaron your brother. And then verses and verses and verses talking about the garments that are to be made for Aaron, because he was to be the high priest. And his sons were to minister with him. So we're making holy garments for Aaron. And if you read through Exodus 28, they are pretty special. They were some amazing garments. Let's go on to verse 40. And for Aaron's sons, you shall make tunics. not the fancy dancy stuff that Aaron has, but tunics. And you shall also make sashes for them, and you shall make caps for them, for glory and for beauty. And you shall put them on Aaron your brother, and his sons with him, and you shall anoint them. So Moses is to anoint Aaron and his sons, and ordain them, and consecrate them, and they are to serve me as priests. So although Aaron was the high priest, he was like the boss, his sons were also to be priests to serve with Aaron. Now, I think that'd be pretty special to be called specifically by God to do something like this. And you shall make for them linen breeches to cover their bare flesh. They shall reach from the loins even to the thighs, and they shall be on Aaron and on his sons when they enter the tent of meeting, or when they approach the altar to minister in the holy place, so they do not incur guilt or die. This is to be a statute forever for Aaron and his descendants. So God is pretty specific. This is what you're supposed to do. Aaron and his sons. His sons are called, right? They are called to minister before God. But what did they do? Chapter 10 of Leviticus. Verse 1. Now Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, took their respective fire pans, and after putting fire in them, placed incense on it, and offered strange fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them. So Nadab and Abihu, they've been watching Dad. They've been watching what Aaron's been doing, and they're like, well, I don't see why we can't do this too. You know, we're priests also, so why can't we just put some fire in our fire pans and we'll... I've seen the Orthodox churches, you know, how they have the incense on their little pans and they have the smoke coming up. I kind of imagine that's what Nadab and Abihu were doing. They had their little fire pan and there's some fire in it, and they put incense on it, and there's smoke coming out. And they think this is a really good idea. Maybe they thought they were worshiping God, but God had not commanded them to do this. Okay? They were to follow Aaron. They're to do what Aaron tells them because he's the boss. And they had not been told to do this. They are on their own. And they're offering this fire. They are being disobedient. What happened to Nadab and Abihu? Looking at my notes. I actually put notes this time. Verse 2. Fire came out from the presence of the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. They thought they were doing the right thing. They thought that they were worshiping God. But in actuality, they were disobeying. And because they disobeyed, fire came out from God and killed them. This is some serious stuff here. Aren't you glad that that doesn't happen now? Because how many of us have done something that we thought we were doing the right thing. We thought that we were honoring God. We thought wrong. And aren't you glad that fire no longer comes out from God and destroys us because we're doing what we think is the right thing when it's not? Because you know what happened? This is serious. In verse 5, it talks about how other relatives took Nadab and Abihu outside the camp. That's what happened to their bodies. But listen to this. Listen to what Aaron had to go through. Verse 6 of Leviticus 10. Then Moses said to Aaron and to his sons Eleazar and Ithamar, so this is Nadab and Abihu's brothers and his dad, do not uncover your heads nor tear your clothes, so that you may not die, and that he, God, may not become wrathful against all the congregation. But your kinsmen, the whole house of Israel, shall bewail the burning which the Lord has brought about. So Aaron and his other two sons were not allowed to publicly grieve. The rest of the congregation could. But Nadab and Abihu's father and brothers could not grieve in the manner that they normally grieved when a loved one died. Imagine that. You have a son, 2 sons, and God kills them. And you can't mourn. And your other children cannot mourn. If you've had a child die, you know how hard this would be. Verse 7 says, "You shall not even go out from the doorway of the tent of meeting, lest you die." So you have to stay in the tent of meeting while your sons are carried away. Why? "For the Lord's anointing oil is upon you." So they did according to the word of Moses. God had anointed them. Remember, we talked back in Exodus, they were anointed, they were consecrated, they were called. And because of that, when Nadab and Abihu didn't do what they were supposed to do, they died. And their father and their brothers couldn't even go to the funeral because they were taken outside the camp, which I'm sure is where they were. I don't know if they buried them or what. I mean, they were burned. The fire of God came out and burned them and killed them. So I'm not exactly sure what all of the funeral rituals were at that time. And I think that we need to take this as a warning. If you've been called by God to do something, do exactly as God tells you to do. And don't do what He hasn't told you to do. You know, somebody might be called to be a pastor. And they might think, well, I need to win souls, so I got to go out and evangelize too. No, sir or ma'am. If you've been called to be a pastor, stay in your lane. Be a pastor. If you've been called to be an evangelist and travel the world and preach the gospel, get people saved, you may think, well, I need to start a church. I need to pastor a church here, and the church can help support me while I go out and evangelize. If God's called you to be an evangelist, go be an evangelist. Don't start a church unless God calls you to do that. Whatever God has called you to do that. Because whatever God has called you to do it's enough to keep you busy. Okay? It's enough. Don't feel like it's not enough. You know, if God's called you to be a mom, be a mom. And I have to go because somebody's here. I'll talk to you soon.